everybody. So yeah, I'm Jessica Lloyd. I'm Head of Global Growth at Being Crypto. We are top 3 by users, and we are top 1 by coverage. So our main method of growth is through localization. We are currently present in 21 languages, and this is kind of our niche within the space, within crypto media and crypto education. So instead of just focusing on crypto as a global economic solution, we also focus on local use cases. And yeah, that's the main part of what I do. So let's talk about scaling Web3 beyond imagination. Come on. So yeah, let's do introductions first of all. Chandru.
Thank you very much, Jessica. Hi, everybody. My name is Chandru, and I'm a co-founder and CTO at Alchemy Exchange. So Alchemy is a decentralized ad exchange. So we enable the buying and selling of ads, online ads, and we're built on Web3 rails. So we look at offering benefits of transparency, auditability, low transaction fees, and less carbon footprint. That's us. Max?
Thanks, Chandru. I'm Max. I'm Head of Growth at Flare. We're a layer 1 EVM chain. I promised Jessica I wouldn't say the word enshrined. We have enshrined oracles, but what it means is they're oracles that are integrated. They're sort of built into the network. So yeah, that's me.
Szymon, co-founder and CEO of Ramp Network. We're leading on-ramp that helps hundreds of developers ease the way of new crypto users to onboard into their dApps. We work with all the top wallets, exchanges, and decentralized applications. But increasingly, we are focusing on Web2 businesses moving into Web3 and to help them bridge their huge user bases to the world of Web3.
Great, thanks, Szymon. David Norris, CFO at Near Foundation. We look after the oversight of the Near protocol. We've been building an L1 for many years, which needs to be scalable and fast. And we've been building in stealth chain abstraction that allows us to transact across any chain. Finally, we've been building our AI use cases to really look after the whole AI stack and bring AI agents into user journeys. And together, that starts moving us to a world of user-owned internet, where the user can have really impactful journeys that suit their life, supported by AI agents with payments made everywhere. So lots of exciting stuff happening.
When we first got given the title for this panel, a few of us interpreted the word scaling the network in a few different ways. So I think to start with, we'll just talk about how we interpret scaling and what's most relevant coming from your organization on that topic.
Thanks. So at Alchemy, we usually talk about the onion model or the Shrek model, where onions have layers, Shrek, ogres have layers, and so do Web3 products. So I look at scaling in a holistic way. It's not just about the network or the technology, but there are multiple layers to scaling: infrastructure, community, marketing, token holders, technology, network, and so on. But one of the key things that I want to bring about is scaling real-world utility and adding liquidity via real-world utility. And what I mean by this is that, and liquidity isn't just me selling a token, you buying the token, you selling, somebody else buying it, but it's about how do products build on real-world utility that will allow fiat, Web2 money, which there is enough of, to come onto crypto, and how is that going to affect crypto? To give you a little bit of background to this, a little bit of context, Alchemy works in the digital advertising ecosystem. So today, the digital advertising ecosystem spends $750 billion every year. And this could very well go up to $1 trillion every year in the next few years to come. So even if we were to bring 1% of that $1 trillion on chain, then that would be $10 billion. Typically, we've seen transaction fees of up to about 6.5% for each of these transactions. So 6.5% of 10 billion, $650 million. That is the amount of money that is available to buy back tokens. That is the amount of money that is available to add value to the Web3 community, right? And when we are talking about these numbers, we automatically think, how do we get that money on chain? That is when things like infrastructure, the community, network, validators, they all become the means to actually get more of the Web2 utility, more of the Web2 cash, the fiat cash into crypto, and that for me would be true scaling, Jessica.
Max?
Wow, well said.
Anything left for you to say?
Well, gosh, I'm not sure. I mean, so I suppose I agree with a lot of what you said. I think for me, it's about what are the applications that users are going to use on a day-to-day basis. And actually, I was chatting with David about this before we came on stage. It's like, when you go to the App Store, or you go to the Play Store, and you download your app and you use it, and you do the thing where you double-click on the side of your phone and it puts the payment through to give you the subscription. How do you get that kind of app, like functionality, supported by blockchain rails? And so that's kind of one of the things that I'm always thinking about as someone who works in the space. I'm sure everyone in this room is kind of thinking about it. What's going to be the use case that really kind of takes crypto to the next level? We look a lot at remittance, obviously, as an industry, and that's probably been one of the best ways of scaling this. I think DeFi is interesting, but there's a lot of room to grow there. I think what we've got to be able to do is have the data availability on the chain. And that's kind of what we're doing at Flare is looking at how we bring more data to the chain, high integrity data that's been acquired trustlessly, that's reliable, and that can be used by developers for free. And that's kind of what we've really set as our main task.
When I think about scaling, I think about the chasm that we need to cross in the next 2 or 3 years. And speaking a lot with people who are launching apps in Web3, I can very clearly see that for most of them, the actual target end user is someone who is already onboarded to Web3. The reason for that is, especially if they're trying to build something that is not a speculative use case, it's very hard to convince someone who is not yet onboarded to Web3 to go through the pain of being onboarded. And if you really think about it, this really means that a lot of what we do in this industry is focused on building, rebuilding, reimagining, and then disrupting again the same bits of infrastructure with very few actual use cases. And I think the key factor here is not that there is lack of will to build stuff that would be targeted, or like where the target would be mass market and mainstream users, but there is just this fundamental issue with inability to convert really well people who are not yet fully onboarded. And so the repeated speculative crazes that happened in this industry were very helpful because a lot of people got onboarded, and this means that we've got some we got some early traction and we've got some early group of early adopters. But to go from early adopters to mainstream, I think we need much more than this group of users. And this is also the major issue that I can hear about when I'm talking to Web2 app developers who are thinking about shifting part of their products to Web3 Rails. They say, hey, I would love to do that. It's a very powerful technology. This would help our users a lot. But there is just too big of a barrier at the very beginning of the user journey, and we would lose so many of them, and we would not be able to convert so many of them. So many of these users would be frustrated. That is just not really worth it for us. And there is very few players who are brave enough and bold enough to actually go and try. And at Ramp, the nature of our business is onboarding new users to crypto and making this entire user journey one click. And obviously, some of the regulations that are in place are not helping. Some of the bank's policies are not helping, but we are pushing. But I think that there is very little appreciation for the real reason why there is not really a big adoption beyond speculative use cases. And I think we should, as an industry, just double down and invest even more in this initial steps and phases of every Web3 user journey. Because I think that there is not enough emphasis on this right now. And this really means that if this continues, we as an industry would become we would be recycling same users, same concepts, same products over and over again, which is not really healthy. So for us as an industry to start scaling our networks, I think there should be much more empathy and focus on the experience of newbies and how they experience their very early steps in the Web3 world. This is what we are trying to do at Ramp.
Great. Can I just do a quick sense check? Who in the room here is more on the engineering product side? Okay, and who's more on sales and marketing and... Okay, so this is great. I mean, this is actually really encouraging. I think virtually every conference I've been to has been very tech heavy, and we're running the risk of going down into a validator scaling session, which is great for us to kind of be able to get back to the realities of the problems. I think my observations on scaling, we've gone through a massive infrastructure phase where the pure infrastructure has needed to be built. We've had to have the protocols built, we've had to have ways to be able to scale it through L2s, looking at sharding on L1s. But now actually really the phase that's really important is how do we get each of the experiences from wallets through to RPCs, like on-ramps, everything speaking together to give real utility to users. The biggest barrier to scaling for me right now is user adoption and messaging. When I speak to any of my friends who are non-crypto, you say the word crypto, it leaves a bad taste in the mouth. And we've got an image problem that we need to adjust as an entire industry. If we're really going to be able to break open and scale, for me, it's a case of understanding what those needs of users are, being able to tell compelling stories to them, bring the real lessons that we've learned in Web3. We don't need to reinvent a lot of them to be able to showcase the amazing tech, the incredible brains that are building this industry, and actually really focus on that user values. So for me, scaling, user journeys, and messaging are the most important thing right now if we're going to move out of this PvP game of trying to take users from each other and move more into how we break open the whole industry.
So when it comes to scaling adoption, scaling community, scaling people that are actually using your products, what is really the key to doing that in a methodical, systematic, strategic way, but also doing it in a decentralized way and keeping the ethos of crypto and blockchain alive? How do you get that balance right?
Do you mind if I take that one first
Please.
of all? Yeah, just to kind of carry on the thread with it. I think we need to kind of work out what really we're trying to solve. I think crypto, Web3 as a whole has been great tech solutions trying to find a problem and not really thinking about the main problems for the users we want to speak to and how we solve them, and then being able to work down through the stack of actually how do we make amazing journeys. How often do you decide you want to be able to participate on a particular chain? You have to go and get a wallet, you have to go and get your assets into that wallet. You then have to deal with bridges potentially. There's so much friction in those journeys that actually most of our people in our industry love. They love the pain to be able to get there. If they don't feel the pain, is it even worth doing? But that's not going to be the average person. And for me, and what we're trying to do at Near, I think we're really trying to get back to the market research around what users really need, how we can bring novel use cases to them, and work with the right partners across the whole of Web3 to drop the ego of it has to be on our chain, to think how do we unify and do the best things possible to get great experiences. And then seeing what the enablers are for that. That means, right, if we really need to scale fast on a tech level, how do you make sure you've got the right incentive mechanisms in place? How do you keep that scalability, security type balance in mind as you're going through that and allow other people to help support that journey? We need to open up.
Absolutely. In fact, one of the key concepts that we follow is the 8 to 80 rule. So the 8 to 80 rule is a classic rule of how product can follow user adoption. And this is what I've realized is 8 is can I explain a product and its relevance to my 8-year-old son? If I can convince him of the relevance of a product, then I think we made a start. Because 8-year-olds, let me tell you, they're way smarter than we can imagine, and they will tell you what they think. And the 81 is, can I convince my 80-year-old dad to use the product? As long as I have been able to achieve both, convince my 8-year-old son about the relevance of a product, and my 80-year-old dad to use the product, I think we're moving somewhere with user adoption. At Alchemy, we look at this in 3 stages. So stage 1 is where we remove barriers to entry. When I say remove barriers to entry, we need to look at who our potential clients are, what are their motivations, what are their problems, what are the kind of standards that they are complying to, what are their methods of integration, what are the kind of features that they expect from product of that type, and then we conform to all of the set rules that the market has set. So we are removing the barriers to entry. That's number 1. Stage 2, for me, would be where we recognize the problems with any incumbents. We recognize what are the problems with similar products in the market, and then we solve those problems. That would be stage 2, which will then allow clients, allow partners to move away from pain. And stage 3 is what we refer to as the wow factor. Right? That is where you give your clients something that they have not experienced or have not expected. So when we cover removal of barriers to entry, moving away from pain, and moving towards pleasure, the classic pain-pleasure theory, I think we are going in the right direction as far as user adoption is concerned.
Yeah, I think, actually, I really loved some of the points that you were making, David, about the way that we've worked so hard as an industry to really prepare the infrastructure for scalability. I think it's been incredible. And Chandru, I agree with you too on the fact that being able to have our technology accessible to not only the 8-year-olds out there, but also the 80-year-olds, these are kind of majorly key points. I think from my own perspective, the blockchain space needs to become more mature. There's 2 scenarios, right? The first scenario is the whole banking system, the governance system kind of collapses, and blockchain becomes like the mainstream adopted piece, which is like, woohoo! And then we all get to kind of be very happy. The other is that blockchain looks at what's happening in the regulatory space and figures out how to comply, how to create the compliance structures, whilst also maintaining interoperability between the different chains. Like each chain is sort of a bit siloed because what you've got in the blockchain industry is a lot of self-referential microcosms or slightly larger cosms like Bitcoin, Ethereum, Near, and other chains. If we can manage to get those aspects and then also provide the data for the applications with the compute, and when I'm talking about compute, I'm talking about trusted execution environment compute that can do stuff like you would do with an app on your phone. Once we get to that level, then I think we'll be able to really scale. So yeah.
The question was about how do we balance out making sure that we can deliver something that is delightful and very simple, streamlined, and the ethos of keeping it decentralized. And this is going to require a lot of tech work, but I also think that we should be comfortable with putting together products that are actually like not the target and products that we want to put together. So it's fine to launch something that is going to be streamlined, semi-centralized, and a stepping stone to what we want to achieve. At the same time, I think that while doing this, we need to also make sure that we're not falling into the trap of like complacency and making this the actual final product. Because if you do that, there is a risk that you're going to be caught up in some sort of like regulatory issues, because it is much easier to regulate out of existence something that ends up being very centralized. So there is a very fine line to thread in this case. It's almost like quite scary, but fortunately a lot of founders in this space are very risk tolerant, so we're gonna keep trying, I guess. But at the same time, we also need to move fast because on one hand, this industry is going to die in a short time if we are not going to keep growing and keep the adoption up and launching new use cases. Because a lot of the faith in this entire industry and in the assets like crypto assets is based on the fact that everyone believes that at some point all of this is going to become actually useful and is going to replace a lot of the Web 2.0 stack. And if we're not going to deliver on this promise from a virtuous cycle, we can get caught up in a cycle that can end up with a collapse. So we need to move fast. We need to launch stuff that is actually useful and be fine with stepping stones, but keep in mind that in the end we need to ship something that is going to be robust and true to the decentralized ethos that we all share here.
Absolutely.
Yeah, when we're talking about adoption, I always hear people saying, yeah, we need to be able to explain it to a 10-year-old, a 5-year-old, an 8-year-old, whatever. That's true. Like, there's too much jargon and things are too technical and whatever. But at the same time, I love that example about nobody needed a manual of how to use ChatGPT because it just solves a problem for people. It's really useful. So people didn't need to educate themselves. If it's useful enough, people will use it. So where do you think that a lot of crypto projects are maybe missing the mark in their messaging, and how can we actually get to a point where we don't need to be simplifying? It's just obvious why they need to use that and things can scale a bit more naturally.
That's an interesting question, because I was actually going to talk about all the technical aspects of how scaling can be achieved using sharding, modular blockchains, and L2s and whatnot, but I think I'll take your lead on that, David. You also spoke about stories. So I think the best way to explain that is a piece of advice that my grandmother gave me when I was a little boy, when I was probably 8 years old. And she always used to say that humans should behave similar to the presence of salt in a curry. And Max, I know you love the curry, so probably you'll enjoy that. So when there's too much salt in a curry, it just spoils the curry. Nobody can eat it. And if there's no salt at all, then the curry is bland and tasteless. But when you have the right amount of salt in the curry, nobody even notices it. How many times have you heard Greg and John say, oh, the vegetables are cooked perfectly, the meat is succulent and juicy, and it's so flavorful? They never once say the amount of salt in the curry is perfect. And that, to me, is how technology should be in a blockchain product, in a Web3 product. That is how the messaging should be. Because technology and what happens under the hood should always be invisible. And unless we are invisible, like the salt in the curry, I think we're missing the mark. So people don't need to know whether we use layer 2s, whether we use modular blockchain, sharding, and whatnot. We can spend hours designing, hours architecting and implementing and testing it. That is for the team to do. But as seen by the customers and the clients, it should be an easy-to-use product with great user experience, period.
Yeah. I love the fact you went for the curry analogy.
I know, we were speaking about curry just before we came here, so how could I not?
That was cool. I agree with you. I think if we can get to a point where people don't know that they're using blockchain. So for instance, I'm not 100% sure about exactly which rails ChatGPT works on, but I'm fairly certain that it's a centralized LLM, and there's inferences that are gained, and it uses various different information sources, and it's very much big tech that is able to kind of provide you with the answers. If we can get to a similar situation, but with decentralized rails, then I think that we stand a good chance of kind of treading this territory.
I think when you talk about simplicity, what you really mean here is how do we create the right messages? And we just need to know who the audience is. And it is fine to be very technical if you are talking to developers. It is fine to be very thorough when you are talking to people who are building products. And it's probably the best idea to be very succinct or even make things self-explanatory if you are targeting people who are actually meant to use your product as end users. And I think that we're just not very good at it yet as an industry, because we are mixing up things that should be relevant to developers with things that should be relevant to people who are creating products and marketing them. And in the end, with stuff that our customers and like end users of the products we're building should hear. And in the end, I think the big transformation that is happening right now, and I'm seeing it, especially this year. I'm seeing a lot of people from the Web 2.0 industry who cut their teeth in companies like Uber, Credit Karma, Monzo, Deliveroo, entering this space, and they just have a very different way of looking at things. I can say that it is probably like the next generation of people who are going to build on top of chains, and they think in a very different way. To many people, I got to know through the last couple of years of my journey in the Web3 world, and I think this is going to do us this is going to be very good for the industry. And I think this sort of fresh perspective of thinking through the lens of it should be self-explanatory, like there should be like no need to provide explanation, but also with this very high bar of what constitutes like a good user journey is also going to be very refreshing and is going to push this industry miles ahead over the next year or two. So I'm very, very hopeful, and I think that we are sort of on track, but at the same time we should be humble. A lot of us here have spent a lot of years in this industry, and like it's very easy to fall into this like know-it-all kind of trap, just simply because we spend so much time here and we think of ourselves as super knowledgeable about the space. But actually, the bits of wisdom that are going to push us ahead are going to come from people who are going to be very naive to a lot of intricacies of the tech we've been building for the last couple of years. And this sort of naivety combined with a very high bar of what constitutes a great user journey is going to be the fuel for Web3 over the next 2 years, I believe.
Yeah, I agree, and I'll try not to repeat the same points, but to summarize what I take out of it is we need to stop talking about what we do, and we need to start talking about more why it's important for end users. And I think 2/3 of the people in this room have the responsibility for that job, and there's a massive reliance on everyone here to really be thinking about how do we mature as an industry to encourage the projects that are building across the whole landscape to be professionalizing somewhat in terms of marketing and preparation. And I'm yet to see that many compelling pitch decks that actually articulate what the user wants. They've seen this amazing tech, and it just reminds me a little bit of Mac from Always Sunny in Philadelphia, where he's got like this map everywhere with all these different things, like mapping it together, and it looks a bit tinfoil hat by the end of it. But actually, there's some really simple user needs that we're speaking to. It's like, are people coming in to be able to give themselves the opportunity to actually have access to finance? There's this huge gap across the world, and there's a real behavioral need. Are people here for status? And the whole NFT landscape and the exclusivity and being part of a club, there's a real kind of user need that sits in there. And I could go on across all the different kind of behavioral economic kind of drivers of people. But I think the people in this room and the people that are on more of the sales and marketing side across the whole industry have got massive responsibility around being professional, growing up a little bit in how we talk about the industry, and thirdly, being brave. There are some unbelievable tech founders who, I mean, I just sit in rooms with some of them just completely overawed with how clever they are, but with no sales plan. And you see those projects have been given crazy amounts of money across the years, but have failed to get user adoption because they haven't been thinking about the messages and the stories they tell. So for me, I think we've all said the same thing here. How do we tell better stories? and how we really kind of play to the hearts and minds of people to be able to capture attention.
Okay, as the final word, we can see there's a lot of different aspects for scaling. What would be your advice based on your personal experiences within your organization for a project wanting to scale within the Web3 space? What would be your brief and quick to the point advice?
I think know your customer. That would be number one, because we need to identify what the motivations of the customers are before we try and build a product, because we shouldn't be building a solution looking for a problem that the solution fits to. Rather, it should be the other way around. Look at the problem and use technology to build a solution. And the other thing that I would say is when it comes to scaling, we're talking about scaling, one of the key things that we overlook is scaling trust. And today, there's a lot of bad press about crypto with a lot of projects. So I think it is very, very important for us to realize the position that we are in, and we are just at the beginning of that huge scale. And we're all optimistic about the direction crypto will go to, and hence there is a lot of responsibility, and we should conduct ourselves, like David was saying, in a responsible manner which makes people know that we are trustworthy. And that, for me, would be the big takeaway. Guys?
Yep, that sounds good. I think understanding your audience and figuring out how you can use blockchain and create something that really means that the users don't know they're using blockchain. We've got all this great infrastructure, everyone is building, and there is the opportunity to use some of that infrastructure to create these great use cases. And finding your home in the space is probably, the biggest task ahead. So.
We were so used to measure our success in TPS, transactions per second, and now we should shift to measuring our success to taps per getting shit done. And in the old paradigm, it was all about who's going to get the most TPS, and right now we should start the race of who's going to get the least TPS to get shit done.
That's a great point. Yeah, that is, it's completely the right thing. I mean, TPS is inherently terrible metric to measure. And the sooner we can get away from that into user value, the better. Revenue follows, trust follows, retention follows. So the number one message I would say to any founder out there is know your customer, really look at those user journeys to see where you can take friction out. Don't be married to your idea. It will evolve, it will change. And to be flexible enough to think, right, how do I really get those feedback loops in to be able to adjust over time? How do I collaborate across the people who have already solved these really hard problems? Why go and build an indexer when there's someone that's already done it over here? Why go and think about my onboarding journey for on-ramps if there's really good on-ramp companies that are already doing it? How can we get better partnerships? And the single most important one, I think, is resilience. I've never worked in a more brutal industry. It's a daily roller coaster where you feel like everything's never going to work, and then next day you get this one particular thing that happens. You're like, the future is here right now. That will continue. So we just need to think about how do we stay strong on that and really look after the business 101 principles that have been around for years and years and years and adjust them for Web3. We've got a bright future ahead.
Great, yeah. Thank you very much, guys. I hope that was valuable, insightful, and not too boring or heavy. Thank you very much.
Thank you.